this is a topic that is so familiar, not familial, but so familiar to all of us. But there's always something to learn about it, because still at this point in time, we are the challenges about the management of intrafamilial abuse has remained the same. It has not changed through the years. We still know that it is, while it is common, when the reports come, it is already have been going on for quite some time. And when there is a case, the probability of desistance is so high. Okay, and so I hope that this lecture will help you in how you think about intrafamilial abuse in terms of prevention and intervention. Just a short review, just to show that the prevalence of violence against children in the Philippines is very high, and that when we did the study, that when the data was gathered in 2015, that was 10 years ago, 3 out of 5 children were either physically or psychologically abused. We hope that we can do this study again to see if it has decreased. 1 in 5 are sexually violated. And when we did this study, while there was already online child sexual abuse and exploitation, it was still new. But now we know that this problem of online has also exploded. So that on top of the contact sexual abuse that we see, we are now more and more also seeing in our WCPUs victims of online child sexual abuse. And we believe that we are maybe even missing out in this diagnosis, because our mindset is still in the contact physical abuse. But the children are now in the digital world, and they're using ICT almost as part of their daily life. And more than half of our patients experience more than one type of abuse. That's why when you see one type, say for example, physical abuse, you should also look if the child is experiencing other types like sexual abuse, psychological abuse, neglect. Because more often than not, they all happen together. And the perpetrators may not be just one person. Maybe the physical abuse is by the parents, the sexual abuse is by the neighbor, the neglect is by the parents, or or the familial abuse, as you will find out later. It's not only sexual abuse, or it's not only physical abuse. What is more common is really polyvictimization. This is still the baseline study that we did so long ago. And here, you could see that most of the abuse, when we look at the different settings of home, school, community, workplace, and dating, most still of the sexual abuse is happening at home. And when we look at the prevalence, male and females, we see slightly higher sexual abuse among males, but we never see them. Rarely do we see them consult at the WCPUs, nor do they report to the police or anybody else. So since the time in 2015, when this data was gathered up to the present moment, we still have not seen an increase in reporting of male sexual abuse, when at the very least, they are as common as the female sexual abuse. So we need to find out how can we increase the reporting and the recognition of male child sexual abuse aside from the females. We're not saying that we should that we all are already achieving our goals in terms of increasing reporting among the females. You also need to do work there, but obviously, the males are the more neglected when it comes to the reporting. The same study showed that in terms of the perpetrators of child sexual abuse at home, okay, at home, number one is brother and stepbrother, followed by the cousin. And then you also have females who are offenders. You have a sister, you have mother also, aunt, grandmother, aside from the male perpetrators. We at the time we could not explain why there are just as many female offenders in this top 10 as well as the male offenders. And some people say that maybe this is because of online child sexual abuse. Because as we have seen in there, of course, there are many subtypes when it comes to online. That would have been the lecture of Sandra. But in the different subtypes, when we're looking at live streaming, wherein the Philippines is infamous and notorious as, and we're even being called as the hub of live streaming of child sexual abuse. The female offenders in terms of the facilitation of the abuse is just the same as the males or even a little bit higher. And a report by the Department of Justice last year showed that there were actually more females, especially mothers, who were prosecuted for live streaming versus males. So that's why we have this kind of data where we have first we have just as many male victims as female victims, and when we talk about perpetrators, we just have as many male and female offenders of child sexual abuse. But also take note here that brother is number one, and when we look at our data of the WCPUs, we don't see brother in the top 10. In fact, we rarely see brother as a reported perpetrator in our of sexual abuse in the WCPU data. In terms of disclosure, again, this is still the VAX. Only 3.3% of the total respondents disclosed the experience of sexual abuse. And this is also the same data that the Disrupting Harm study done in 2020 on online child sexual abuse. Around 0 to 3% also disclose their experience of online child sexual abuse. So same with contact sexual abuse. And to whom they will disclose, half of the respondents said they disclosed to their friend. Only 11.5% reported to their mothers, while 6.8% chose to disclose to their father about their experience. So reporting to mother, father, or friends, this is not the same as reporting to authorities. Because even if they do disclose to their relatives and friends, very few among them who disclose would also report to authorities or even file a case. Now, when we look at our data, the WCPU data in terms of who are the offenders, we see here number one is neighbor, followed by acquaintance, uncle, father, boyfriend. This was in 2025. When this was just last year, okay? This is our data last year. Dumadami yung boyfriend. Okay, so we have to find out again if we're missing out on OSEC, because the boyfriend could actually be because the child was groomed. And most of our referrals at the WCPUs, number one is still the police, followed by walk-in. What should be noted here is that we receive so few referrals from the teacher, only 6. Okay. This is nationwide. So very few schools. School here, 39. Okay. This is nationwide. Okay. So very few schools report child sexual abuse, even though actually among the different, uh, aside from the relatives and the friends, then the number one person that the child will report to based on the box is the teacher. But very few would re- would report out of the school. So when we look at intrafamilial versus extra-familial abuse, we find that younger children, are the ones who report more the intrafamilial abuse, of which is really logical because they're exposed more to their family than to people outside. And intrafamilial abuse starts younger than extrafamilial abuse. And there is no difference between males and females. This is a study by Loinas. And this is not a Philippine study, but we have the same. No, this is what we also see at the WCPUs. It takes longer for the victim of intrafamilial abuse to disclose, and it takes a longer duration. So many incidents have already happened by the time that the child will disclose. If you look at our data, the WCPUs, most of our patients are aged 13 to 15. But that is the time that they make the report. If we do study those who report 13 to 15 years old, the intrafamilial ones, we will probably find out that it didn't start when they were 13. It started when they are much younger. Of course, we even have patients who are babies, and there's no way that a baby can disclose. But it probably happened sometime around when they were like 7 years old or maybe even 5 years old. Um, so that's why, again, back to the fact that when we're looking at younger victims, most of the time, the perpetrators are family. Because it just goes with the stages of development. In this study by Finkelhor, that is what also, of victimization, that was what he showed, that the younger the child, the probability that the offender is a family member is very high because they're the ones who the child is in contact with. And as the child grows older, the child goes to school, has more friends outside the family, then that's when you have all the other, group, other people. That's when you have extra familial child sexual abuse. But for the Philippine context, um, and I hope we do this study also, I will include personally, I will include for the younger children based on our WCPU statistics. I will include neighbor because neighbor is like family to us. And the exposure of the child to the neighbor is just like also the family. So that's why for us, our data shows our number one, at least for those reported cases. Okay, so there's a difference between reported cases and unreported cases. So, but in our reported cases, our number one is neighbor. I would categorize them almost like family also. So, um, I'm just trying to my slides are being covered, so I will just first adjust my slides. Okay. So let's discuss further sibling sexual abuse, because like what the Vax had showed, brother is actually the number one perpetrator. And that is not only in the Philippines. So in this study by Yates, and this is a scoping review, the most common form of sexual abuse, the offender is a sibling. Okay, globally. No, this is a review of all published cases. And sibling sexual abuse is 3 to 5 times more common than sexual abuse by the father. And predominantly, the offender is the brother. It's the male sibling. And most of the time, the sex of the child who is harmed in these published studies, in 60 to 80%, it is the sister. And just because it's incest, it is of long durations. Again, it lasts years, with several episodes before any of it becomes known. But many of these will go on for even up to the time the child is an adult. So it does not stop uh, just during childhood. It can continue on up to adulthood. Oops. There may also be more than one child responsible. So it could be that there are more than one perpetrator, more than one brother who is the offender. Okay, and there could also be more than one victim, more than one sister who is harmed in the family. And in more than half of those cases, its own the victim is harmed by more than one family member. So it could be that the victim has been already sexually abused by the father and then was sexually abused by the brother, or vice versa. The brother sexually abuses the sister, and then the father also sexually abused this daughter. Okay, so it is quite common that it's not only one. So when you do your assessments, be very careful. Do not always think that because there was a disclosure, for example, that the father sexually abused his daughter, that it's only the father who is the sexual abuser in the family. It could also be that the brother had also sexually abused this same victim that you are seeing, wherein the identified abuser was the father. Or it could be vice versa. You're looking at the brother as the sexual offender and you think that's it only, and not investigate further if there were other abusers in that family. Pala, dalawa. It's the brother and the father. Okay. And remember also that sibling sexual abuse can take place in any kind of family with children. So it does not only happen in poor families. This also happens in rich families, any kind of family. So that's why in any socio-economic background, this happens. And this is also one of our findings of the box, where we saw that sexual abuse cuts across socio-economic class. While what we see in WCPUs might be mainly victims who come from poor background, it's just because they were discovered more frequently. But it just happens just as frequently in those who come from the rich socio-economic class. But they even keep it more of a secret than the poor families. So what are the risk factors for sibling sexual abuse? Most studies corroborate that a significant portion of boys who have sexually abuse a sibling have themselves experienced abuse and trauma in their life, although not necessarily sexual abuse. So they could also have experienced, many of them have experienced also physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect by a family also within that same family. And then it could be that because of that experience, then they themselves now have all these other conduct problems. So they may have other conduct problems aside from sexually abusing a sibling. They could also be very aggressive with other children, or they have problems in school. They may have a learning disability, or some may already be in conflict with the law. Also very important to note is the influence of pornography. Pornography has such a bad influence in these children. Many of these offenders, sexual offenders, not only intrafamilial but also extrafamilial, have exposure to pornography. And the studies on perpetrators in general, not only in incest, but perpetrators, sexual offenders in general, they always say that, that they are really into pornography. And many of them, when they get first exposed to this pornography, it is accidental. It's not like they sought out the pornography. It's just that pornography is so common now with social media and smartphones, and it's just everywhere. It's so easy to access. So even just accidentally being exposed to this pornography, they get caught up in it. And later on, this is so addictive, they become addicted. And that often than not is one of the major factors aside from adverse childhood experiences. So you have that triangle. Adverse childhood experiences like experiencing abuse, exposure to pornography, and then the rationalization, saying that, oh, this is not bad. Actually, this is normal behavior. Okay, so with that triangle, then you have the sexual offense. Other risk factors, high levels of domestic violence and parental conflict. The parents themselves also may have affairs with other people. Many stressors that the family is experiencing, financial, housing. Many siblings, they're sharing a bed and a bath. So actually, it's high risk. But if you're poor, then you would be sharing a bed and a bath. You can be taking a bath together. So those are no boundaries. Okay, so those are high risk. They might also be experiencing other forms of abuse in the home, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect. There is lack of supervision by the parents, or you may have OFW parents, or the parent is working out of the home. It may be the older sibling who is taking care of the younger siblings. So they have more power over the younger siblings. They're basically already acting like the parent of the younger siblings. The parents themselves may have many problems: mental health, substance misuse, alcohol misuse. Okay, so what it just shows is that most of these families where there is sibling sexual abuse, there are a lot of stressors. And so in the home, there are loose boundaries. The children may see their parents also watching pornography, or the parents are showing them pornography, or the parents are having sex in communal area. So if you have a one-room house, so the parents are having sex, even if of course, the children are also there. Okay, fathers being naked around the house, and in many cases, the brother-sister sexual abuse is preceded by the father also sexually abusing the daughter. That happened in 32% of cases in one study. It could also be a house where, in spite of all of these loose boundaries, sex is a taboo topic. You know, you're not allowed to talk about sex, or you're discouraged to ask any questions about sex. But in, we must never underestimate the effects of sibling sexual abuse. It is a serious form of child sexual abuse. Never mind what age the child, because they found that sometimes it's minimized because the children who were reported are very young, say 7, 6, and then they'll just say, oh, you know, it's just children playing. Sure, it could be that it's children playing, but the thing is, it should be assessed and something should be done about it. Not putting the child in prison. That's not what we are talking about. When we talk about interventions here, it is not prosecution. It's about managing what the problems are there in the home. So, what are the effects? So, in the short term, of course, during there could be physical injury, fear, hypersexualization, feeling betrayed, manipulated, or fooled. There could be many mental health problems already at this time, like PTSD, guilt and shame. And then, but, you know, you must remember that in some of these, the child may feel some physical pleasure during some of the abuse, which actually, because some parts of the body are really erotic zones, and that if they're stimulated, the child may feel physical pleasure and they get confused. And they also get confused on where the responsibility of the abuse lies. They also might blame themselves and say that they participated in the abuse because they felt pleasure, but it is still sexual abuse. Even if there is this feeling of pleasure, you will still experience the consequences. Doesn't mean that there is no consequence because pleasure was felt. It is still the same consequences as forced sexual abuse. So long-term impacts include ongoing guilt and shame, depression, low self-esteem, alcohol or substance misuse, dissociative symptoms, suicide attempts, suicide ideation, okay, difficulties around sex, somatic complaints, extreme fear, complex PTSD, and so forth. And this could go on for years and years until they are adults. And even with an adult sexual partner, they might still have this emotional distance. And the parents of these children, if they're not the ones abusing the children, they also feel angry about it and isolated. And they might be estranged from their friends because they're ashamed of what is happening in their family. And even with their own other family members, you know, they tend to isolate themselves. Okay. And when this is exposed, parents often respond negatively or with disbelief. Isn't it? I'm sure you must have had patients where the offender is a sibling. And then you have angry parents who say, who will not, first, they will not believe that this is happening, that, you know, our family is not like that. That does not happen in their family. Some would just yell and tell their children to stop and not to do it again, but that will not stop, even if the parents will yell at them and punish the children. And as I said, some professionals will downplay that it's not a serious problem and that maybe, you just tell them to stop it and that will stop, but that will not stop, So really, we need all of these children should be assessed. And in the assessment, you will see whether this behavior is really normal, quote unquote, or you really need to do some intervention. Okay, so sure, young children may, as part of normal sexual development, might just be exploring their sexuality with older children, but that still has to be assessed. If the behavior that they're manifesting is really part of normal sexual development or not, or that it is already abuse. So many of the interventions in sibling sexual abuse, the interventions are modeled around the usual victim perpetrator framework, wherein you're talking about putting somebody in jail. For sibling sexual abuse, most of the time, that kind of management where, okay, you report to the police and put the offender in prison, the brother in prison, is found to be unhelpful and potentially damaging. Okay, so the approach taken for interventions in sibling sexual abuse have to be holistic. So the issue is not just about the brother and the sister, but the whole family. And so the first of all, the assessment, the whole family should be assessed. And then you find out what is the strengths and the weakness of this family. And so it is really a complex assessment. I'm not here to discuss this slide, which is very complicated. But this is one of the suggested management for sibling sexual abuse, where the domains to be assessed are the sexual behaviors. What are the sexual behaviors that were discovered? What are the family dynamics and parenting? What is the home circumstance and the housing? How are the children doing in school? What is the health and development issues that is affecting the both the victim and the offender? What is the social context? Are they looking at pornography? What kind of social media are they using? What's the community? What is the family support network? Okay, so you really have to assess all of these domains, and then you need to have an action plan that is centered around all of these different domains: the individual child, the family dynamics, the circumstances in the home and the neighborhood and in the school. So this is like multi systemic therapy kind of management. So okay, so that's we're done with that sibling sexual abuse. Let's go now into explanations of intrafamilial child sexual abuse perpetration. How about father-daughter incest, for example? Is there some explanation to find why fathers will do that to their children? Well, in this meta-analysis of Cito, he found that men who committed intrafamilial child sexual abuse, they actually, most of them are not pedophiles. And many of them are not more antisocial than men who commit extrafamilial child sexual abuse. What they found, the same as in the sibling sexual abuse, is that these men in incest offenders were more likely to have also experienced sexual abuse in their family. In the family, or if not only sexual abuse, but there's a lot of abuse going on when they were also growing up, abuse and neglect, and there is also poor relationship with their own parents. So that's why you see here intragenerational effect of intrafamilial child sexual abuse. And the sparks, there are very few research on this, but in the few researches on the family of these men who are offenders of incest, they really see a lot of relational and sexual dysfunction in their own homes, these men, when they were growing up. There are also patriarchal attitudes in those families where men feel that they have sexual entitlement, and also a high prevalence of intimate partner violence in the history and as when they were growing up, these men offenders. So, as you could see again, just to emphasize that families with intrafamilial child sexual abuse had a consistently higher risk of other abuses happening in the family. So it's not only the sexual abuse. It's twice as likely that there is also physical abuse happening, emotional abuse, and neglect. And the largest effect size were for exposure to intimate partner violence, parental alcohol abuse, and non-intact family structures. So if we look at in many of these incest cases that we have, there are many problems within the parents. It could be the parents are separated, or now the mother has a new partner, the father has another partner. So non-intact family structures. So there is really a big overlap between intimate partner violence and child abuse. And the risk factors for that, as we've said, lower caregiver education, poor partner relationship, a young mother, a mother having maternal depression, the father having antisocial behavior with alcohol and drug abuse, and a violent neighborhood. But when you are assessing either childhood abuse or intimate partner violence, you should look for it. If you're looking at a child abuse case, you should look for intimate partner violence also happening. When you're looking at intimate partner violence, you also look at child abuse happening. And we know that there is intergenerational transmission, and that these children victims of the first generation also will, most of them may experience intimate partner violence from their own partners when they are adults, and they may also start abusing their own children. As we said, it's all intergenerational, and so we have to stop it in the first generation because we don't want it to go on into the other generations to come. So, of course, a large proportion of these children and adults also survive their abuse and neglect. We always say that many children are resilient, and there are some interventions that might help, like finding healthy solutions to identified problems, like increasing physical activity, smoking abstinence, learning and education, and socio-emotional support. So it's not just psych therapy. But we all know that there are now many prevention programs that work. That's why where we see Inspire, these are the list, the programs that the best available research show that can prevent violence from happening again. And these Inspire strategies, just to review for those who have not heard of it, is enforcement implementation of the laws. N is about changing norms and values. S is about safe streets and environments. P is about parenting. I is economic security or income improvement. R is response, like WCPUs, for example, health, social welfare, and criminal justice support services. And E is education, socio-emotional learning, and life skills. So there are many strategies under these different Inspire strategies. This was re-evaluated. It was updated quite recently, published in the Lancet, late 2025. For those, you can take a picture of this and you can get a copy of this updated evidence of Inspire. And what they have shown is that what it highlighted which are the most effective intervention programs. And these are parenting, whole school approaches, healthy relationship education, cash plus life skills program. So like for example, our 4Ps program plus the FDS and cognitive behavior therapy for violence exposed children. Okay, so there are many programs that we can promote and develop that can prevent abuse from happening in the first place, or when we discover abuse early, stop it from going on to the next generation. Okay, so for example, for the parenting, what they found, what they're now thinking is that to prevent incest, you really need to have um, a child and parent bonding with the father. If there are increased bonds between the baby and the father, the probability of incest happening is decreased. Okay, and if we have effective parenting programs, what our research have shown here in the Philippines is that it decreases child physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect by at least half. So these are effective programs that we should be implementing if we want to decrease the number of abuse cases that we are seeing in the WCPUs.